Imagine that your job is to mediate between Israelis and Palestinians, to go there and work on them finding common ground, or to go to Serbia in the 90s and mediate there and see what's happening there, or go to Sierra Leone and other African countries that are consumed by war and violence. What outlook do you think that would give you on life? Well, Marshall Rosenberg did just this, and this is what he had to say about his outlook on life and on humanity. Quote, "I feel I'm a very rich man. I see a different world than you see on the news. I see a world of people committed to compassionate giving, who want to create structures that support this compassionate giving." I spent a significant amount of time considering the why of nonviolent communication. Learning and practicing takes effort, so every time I introduce a new technique, tool, or philosophy of life, I aim to give you a bond that if you take this journey, you will achieve this or that. Usually it's a clear-cut question, but NVC offers many benefits, and some of them are subtle and a little bit hard to explain. And there are many angles that one can take with it, and so I had to think really hard which one I would choose. And what I chose in the end was to highlight the positive outlook and connection that comes from being able to see and to be seen as a human being. As I was listening to the audio course version of the book, listening for what angle to take, it was this quote that really stood out to me. In particular, it was, "I see a different world than you see on the news." That bit. Because I've been increasingly seeing a very different world too. There are many tragedies happening in the world that can upset us, and that do upset us. Turn on your Wi-Fi and there's an endless avalanche of tragedy with the particular flavor that we consume, depending on our philosophical outlook. A dying planet, people dying of hunger or curable disease in a world of plenty, the poor being deprived of economic opportunity, governmental action destroying people's freedom, prosperity and life, children being abused, etc. And there's always a culprit. It doesn't matter if it's the mainstream or the alternative media, they will more than guaranteed give you the enemy. The heartless, evil, destructive, irredeemable consumer, capitalist, rich person, poor person, politician, government employee, single parent, and the list goes on. You will be told to watch your step, to watch every shadow, to be ready for violence because self-defense is the only option against this enemy. Or in some places they will say that you should ostracize them and unmask them as evil to the world. Everyone will tell you that it's impossible to understand or connect to your enemy, that it's the most foolish and dangerous thing to do, and it will surely end in you being hurt or destroyed. I had a work colleague whom I told that I enjoyed the works of Ayn Rand, and that literally ended the conversation. It seemed to me that he had never met someone who did, and the fact that I did evoked so much anger and spite in him that I immediately moved into the enemy bucket. I turned from a person to a caricature of a person, a cardboard cutout, and there was no more point in talking to me. And I myself had a very similar reaction to someone telling me that they were a government employee, which is my own flavor of enemy imagery, and that though they saw some issues, they still found pleasure and meaning in their work. I was so conditioned in enemy imagery that fact alone made it impossible to me to continue seeing the other person as a human being committed to compassionate giving. He instead became a collection of scary and disgusting labels and images. turn to something lighter and you will learn that men, women, children, old people, conservatives, liberals, country folk, city folk are strange and impossible to understand. That the most benevolent thing is accepting them as weird and quirky people and to only laugh behind their backs. Alternatively, you will be taught of the weird psychological trick that you can use to hack other people's minds, to sell them things that they're reluctant to buy, to get them in bed, to make them fall in love. The exact same views are promoted regarding our inner world. From religious to secular, parts of us are sinners, immoral, animalistic, or self-destructive. These parts must be overcome with willpower, discipline, or psychotherapy. They mustn't be allowed to have a voice and definitely not to take helm. They must be feared and fought against. In more advanced circles, they are to be accepted as they are, and there's a hope that acceptance makes them go away somehow. Nonviolent communication, commonly abbreviated as NVC, and that is what I will use, is the alternative to all of this. Hello and welcome to Valiant Growth, the podcast that empowers you to earn self-esteem, build amazing relationships, and achieve freedom. My name is Philip Frey, and today I will be doing a short intro to nonviolent communication, NVC, in which I talk about the why and I try to present some key ideas. It's a pretty expansive subject, so it's only going to be a brief overview, but I will try to make that as good as possible. And this episode is a prequel to an interview that will come out this Friday. And initially that interview was meant to be the intro, but I decided to record one separately and release it previously so that you can take full benefit from the knowledge of that discussion. I found the typical way in which the core philosophy of NVC is presented to be hard to understand, and it kind of raised suspicion in me the first time I saw it. A common expression is that it enables compassionate giving and life-affirming communication. I didn't know what that meant before I read the book, so I've decided to give you an alternative angle. The way we are taught to talk to one another, our language, is functional, but it is severely flawed. It's like an alpha version. It's like trying to talk to a foreign person using Google Translate 10 years ago. You will sometimes make sense, especially when expressing simple stuff, and sometimes you won't, and overall it will be a frustrating experience for both parties. When it comes to our language, and I don't think it matters that much which particular language it is, I'm not referring to English as a language, but I'm referring to the typical way in which people communicate to one another today. So in our language, the simple stuff is the intellectual, that pertaining to the physical world and also the abstract world of ideas. The hard part where we struggle, where it's so frustrating, is emotion, motivations, and generally things pertaining to our inner world, our human core, our humanity. How many times have you successfully explained a concept or how to use a piece of software or taught somebody a recipe? How many times have you successfully learned something of this nature from someone, even a relative stranger? I would guess quite often. Compare this to how many times you have felt understood, psychologically visible. How about successfully corrected someone's understanding of your motivation? Successfully sat down with someone who has very different strategies, that is very different approaches to what they want to see in the world, and especially how they want to achieve those things. A very different philosophy. How many times have you successfully sat down with someone like that and corrected your views on their motivation and found out that why they want to do these things, what you thought about that is incorrect? I would guess not so often. For instance, it's easy to explain supply and demand to almost anyone, the principles behind it. It's also easy to explain that having rules that protect the most vulnerable are beneficial in groups of people, within groups of people. But try applying supply and demand to minimum wage with a socialist, and you will have a hard time. Try explaining how the minimum wage can have benefits for poor people and that the downsides can be mitigated by other laws to a free market capitalist, and you're in for a rough ride. What happened? The connection broke. You're suddenly a heartless exploiter, a mindless agent of big banks or corporations, or you're suddenly a state propagandized puppet of union leaders and politicians. We are taught to jump to labels in our minds and in our speech. We are taught to assume the worst about people who are different from us. We are taught to not recognize the root of the anger, the fear, the sadness that we feel. We are taught to not take responsibility for it. We are taught to ignore our feelings, to not focus on why we feel what we feel and why others feel what they feel, but to find out who is guilty, who is the bad boy, who's the bad girl, and how they should be punished. NVC offers a set of tools that help break down and clarify this buggy and often tragic communication, and through that process, reveal the humanity of those we love, those we hate, those we admire, those we fear. Its power is in its precision. Novice NVC users generally sound very formulaic as they try to master these first steps, because having both a fluent and an accurate language is an art in itself. It's very similar to academic language. New PhDs often write theses that feel really fake and pretentious because they're aiming for accuracy but cannot make it poetic. I will present two techniques, two ideas, two approaches from NVC. The first one is the OFNR model. And the OFNR model is one of the basic tools of NVC. It stands for observations, that's O, feelings, that's F, needs, that's N, and request, that's an R, so O, F, and R. And I found this a little bit hard to understand in podcasts about NVC, this model, and I only got it when I read the book, but maybe if I try my hardest and give you my full attention in how I'm formulating this, I can actually convey the model even in this format. So the O, observations, the first one, they are the ways in which we describe things to ourselves and others. It's our translation of what our senses have perceived. NVC encourages us to be accurate and to avoid labels. I am so clumsy is an observation. I have broken 2 dishes today and another one 3 weeks ago is a much more accurate version of the same observation. The first one is a closed path. It's almost like destiny. I'm clumsy. The second one is only presenting the problem, but leaves the door open to further exploration. What have I done differently today and 3 weeks ago than all the other days in between when I didn't break anything? What can I learn from that? How can I prevent this from happening? That's observation. Feelings are, so that was the O, and now we were going to the F, which is feelings, and they are our emotional reaction to the observation. NVC encourages us to be aware of what we feel and be careful not to mix feelings with observations and thoughts. For example, when you break the dishes, I feel that you don't care about me or anyone is not a feeling, but an observation. In this case, a guess at the motivation of the other person, and it's simply stated as a fact. When you break the dishes, I feel sad, or when you break the dishes, I feel angry is much more accurate, and one of the goals of NVC is to achieve this accuracy and through that enable communication that stays connected. How likely are you to stay connected to someone who said the first statement versus the second one? How likely are you to stay connected to someone whom you have classified as uncaring? So we've got the OF, now moving on to the NR, of which the N is needs. Understanding our own needs and that of others is immensely powerful because needs and the types of needs that we have are the common denominator of humans. I found that understanding the underlying needs of people who I disagree with has been the most powerful tool for being able to see them as human beings, and expressing my own has allowed them to see me as a human being. Combined with assuming the best about other people and going from there, it's very potent. For instance, for years I've had a very hard time connecting to socialists and understanding their point of view and what motivates them, but after I've thought about it, it became pretty obvious that it is a deep caring for the needs of poor people and everything else, or at least for a good chunk of them, and everything else is just how they want to achieve that. But that caring, that caring for their needs, that caring for their vulnerability, that caring for justice in their own definition is something that I have as well, and perhaps it's not as strong in me, but it's something that I definitely can understand, even while disagreeing to the strategies proposed. The powerful observation of NVC and other philosophies, such as Stoicism, is that our feelings are not caused by events and people in our life and our observations of them, but by our needs not being met, or interpreting what has happened as a threat to their fulfillment. And this liberates us from non-actionable blame and this extreme dependency and vulnerability of depending on others to change to meet our needs, and enables us to instead find and negotiate alternative strategies. The technique parts, the OFNR here, it warns us of common patterns of speech and thought that shift our focus away from our needs. Labels and observations can just as easily sneak into the place of needs as they sneak into those of feelings. When you break the dishes, I feel angry because you don't care about our finances. There's no need expressed in this example. It's an observation that pretends to be a need. Compare that to when you break the dishes, I feel angry because I want appreciation for my income earning hard work and I feel I'm not getting it. Being called an uncaring person disconnects us, and calling someone an uncaring person disconnects us again from them. The need or desire for appreciation, though, is something commonly human. It's something that we can understand, relate to, empathize with. And a little NVC red flag is any expression that goes like, I feel something because you, I feel something because it, or anything else other than I feel something because I. And the book has such techniques and red flags and little warning signs all through it. So we had observations, that's the O. We had feelings, that's the F. We had needs, that's the N. And we come finally to R in OFNR. And that R stands for request. Requests are the solutions that we seek to meet our needs. And it makes more sense calling them strategies when it's applied internally. And I myself mix these two up, and I think I got this word from Daryl Becker, whose interview is next on the podcast. So the R, the requests often flow very naturally from N, the needs part of OFNR. Correctly identifying our need in a given situation will likely help find a working strategy, a good request to make to ourselves or of others. I think that in the OFNR model, the further you go along with the letters from the O to the R, the less often understanding between people is commonly achieved. So our observations are often understood. Our feelings are sometimes understood. Our needs are rarely understood. and our requests are extremely rarely correctly identified. In political debates, needs are almost always misconstrued, and because of that, the strategies proposed can easily be labeled as evil or amoral or uncaring. There's a tradition of assuming the worst about the needs, the values of outgroups. I found a lot of peace of mind and connection in assuming the best possible motivation, the best possible need that a political strategy may be serving. To give you food for thought, until I get to it in a future podcast, think of what human needs an ideal capitalist utopia versus an ideal socialist utopia would fulfill, and what needs the people promoting these ideologies have, why they promote it. Internally, identifying needs and strategies can be immensely helpful because when brought to the light of consciousness, there's often a mismatch that then can very easily be remedied. I had a very powerful discovery along these lines with my need for safety. I've been trying to take this leap that I've recently taken, which, if you search for Philip Frey on YouTube, I have a little vlog going where I talk in more detail about it. But recently I quit my job and I've made this podcast my main focus and nothing else. And I've identified my need for safety even before having read NVC. It's one of my core needs. And my strategy for meeting this need was to also pursue something else. So I tried doing this when I started this podcast. A little bit before that, I tried to just live from this, but to meet my need for safety, I said, okay, I'm gonna study. I don't know what I wanted to do at the time. I wanted to design websites. At one point, I was studying that, accounting, all sorts of different things, and that actually split my focus and made it harder to achieve something meaningful in any of these areas. And then I was listening to an interview on School Sucks, and there the guest said that people have a need for safety, and I agreed. And he said, but that should be food and shelter, and problems arise when that need for safety expand beyond food and shelter. And I remember I paused. It wasn't so long ago. I say I remember. It wasn't that long ago. But I paused the podcast, and it was so powerful. It struck me that, yeah, I mean, I have a need for safety, but I could very well, if I had food and shelter, that's pretty much enough. Like everything else, I've gotten to a point where I don't need more safety than that. And in light of that, looking at my strategy again and how waiting to build up savings or pursuing another course or whatever, getting another profession, does go beyond, because I mean, food and shelter, I have enough people that my friends that care about me, care about my well-being, and I have these really interesting hacks and tools as well of living very frugally and being happy and satisfied on very little, and they might very well be able to provide that for me should I not succeed at all. So what is holding me back? And that realization made me take this leap, which you find out right now if you're not following me on Facebook, not following Valiant Growth on Facebook. You should. Sorry. To put it in NVC, you would benefit from it, I think. But anyway, when I compared my need and I clarified my need and I clarified how great my need actually was, and I compared it then to the strategy, so I brought all of this in the light of consciousness, as I've said before, it was a breakthrough. So it's so powerful. And on the external plane, between people, between myself and others, I found striving to express clear requests in my communication with others, I found it to be very effective in taking a lot of the stress out of relationships. And I found this even before I ever heard of NVC. I think this was something that I discovered on my own, that being clear on what I'm requesting and what other people are requesting of me is very helpful. A lot of conflicts come out of people not expressing or asking others what exactly they would like to see them do, and instead they hint at it, or they don't express it at all, or they express it through non-verbal communication, but it's kind of fuzzy. Very often we tell one another what not to do, and that's not that helpful, because when somebody tells you you shouldn't, then you probably won't. But it doesn't give you the answer. It doesn't give you clearly what the other person is expecting of you, like what exactly it is, what the positive action is. And the book is full of examples like these, where a lot of blaming and labeling between couples was quickly dissipated when the parties actually made clear requests of one another after decades of not doing it in their marriage. And pairing requests with needs, so NR, is just a great cherry on top of all of this for two reasons. Number one, it puts the request into context and it humanizes the requester. It creates a bridge between the two parties because we share needs. We understand needs. I might feel hurt if someone simply requested me not to talk to them, but I'd probably feel very differently if they added the need, that they need alone time because they're grieving or need to work out a complicated problem of their own. That's such a different thing already. And number two, it allows for creative new strategies to be proposed that can meet the needs of both parties. If you know why I ask you to do something, in almost all instances, a plethora of other options will open up that will fulfill the same need, and very likely you will be able to propose a solution, or we can together find a solution that still meets my needs, but also meets your needs. And this is a very powerful alternative to compromise, where the fulfillment of all the needs of every party involved doesn't have to be sacrificed. So that's OFNR. Observations, feelings, needs, and requests. They are linked. The order matters. Observations trigger, but don't cause, feelings, which are actually caused by unmet needs, which then can be met by making requests of others or changing our strategies internally. So I'm going to repeat that just to make up for the limitations of this medium. So observations trigger but don't cause feelings, which are actually caused by unmet needs, which then can be met by making requests of others or changing our strategies internally. So that was OFNR. Another word salad from NVC are the 4 Ds of disconnection. Learning to recognize these helps us observe and avoid disconnecting communication. Observing them in us will help us reformulate our thoughts and go through our own OFNR, and observing it in others will show us that they need more compassion in the conversation. These 4 Ds are diagnosis, giving someone an unrequested label, such as you're a psycho. Denial of responsibility, such as, well, I have to follow the rules. It's company policy. I don't have time. I can't afford it. I got these from Radical Personal Finance. The 3rd D is demand, which is a twisted request, a request with the threat of punishment. Clean your room or else. I won't talk to you unless you change your statist ways. And finally, the 4th D is deserve-oriented language. I deserve a better man than you. Single mothers deserve to be ostracized, etc. The book looks at a number of other techniques and aspects of NVC. I think, however, that beginning from understanding the philosophy OFNR and the 4Ds is work enough on its own. It's a discipline with quite a lot of depth, and the book can be read many times to discover new angles. Another aspect that you can find in the book, and I've been talking of the book, but there's also a very good audio recording, kind of which is not the book read aloud, but it's also very good. And then there's a free workshop on YouTube that you can follow along. So all of these contain a lot of incredible examples of NVC applied, and I do mean incredible. These examples were the hook that attracted me the most. And initially I seriously doubted that they were true, because they depict situations of conflict that seemed unsolvable with the tools that I had with my understanding at the time. But as I read the book and imbibed more of the philosophy, it started to make sense, and I was really, really impressed. I was moved by the fact that conflict can be solved, and the humanity between people, the connection can be discovered even in places where we normally think it isn't. And I'm not gonna give you these examples because you can listen to them actually in Marshall Rosenberg's own words. NVC has had an invaluable effect on my life. I have practiced the technique less than I wish to have done it, but just the philosophy itself has been an incredible shift in my life. It has opened up relationships that I thought previously were impossible, and radically changed my thinking about humanity in general. If you remember the quote, I see a different world out there. It's painful to admit, but reading it made me regret putting out some of my material on relationships. And I was reading the book and I was like, oh damn, what have I done? And upon actually re-listening, I feel that in those episodes I've still managed to hit a relatively gentle and empathic tone compared to my sources of inspiration. I was already going in this direction before even having started the podcast, but I do have a history of causing great damage, unnecessary harm and pain in my relationships because I lacked this understanding. And maybe I'll talk of that in the future, but I just wish I could go back in time and undo the pain, the anger, the sadness that my disconnected communication has caused. I'm very happy, however, that I've gotten the opportunity to at least grow this skill in the future. And I still think the core principles of relationships, which is the title of one of my series, they hold. Those ideas hold. They are true, particularly that we should be mindful if others bring value to our life or not. We should guard ourselves from entering relationships with people whom with we cannot find win-win interactions, and should judge other people's characteristics carefully. We should use our judgment. What has changed is two things. First of all, I think that I have severely underestimated the percentage of people whom with enriching connections and relationships can be formed with. I have overestimated the dangers that certain people can pose to us. I have formed the habit and encouraged others to pass judgment using very little information. And perhaps most importantly, I've come to realize that it says more about my own communication skills, how many people I can live with, rather than about the virtues and vices of others, which is incredibly empowering because that makes creating amazing relationships much, much more actionable and much, much more within my sphere of control. I believe now that as we progress in our ability to trust, as we build our communication skills, as we become more resilient and more capable of getting our needs met within ourselves and form a strong support network, the more viable taking risks and adopting a positive view of others becomes. We will shed enemy imagery, moralizing, and the focus on self-preservation at any cost, like the old and worn skin that it is, as we become capable of adopting high-trust systems. NVC is a great step in that direction. You can learn more about NVC from the book that I kept mentioning, and an affiliate link to that is valiantgrowth.com/NVC. Also, and perhaps however, I have discovered that there's an audio workshop out there, and I just thought that it's just a recording of the book, but it's not. It's still a thorough, and it's actually read by the author himself, Marshall Rosenberg, and it's really good. His voice, his kind of his tone of voice, and the way he speaks, I found really facilitated inhabiting that kind of mentality that NVC takes. So if you want to check that out, you can do it for free if you don't have an Audible account. And I haven't been so interested in setting up an Audible affiliate link, because I just assumed that everybody has an Audible account already, but that's not true. So I kind of realized that lately. So I did set up an affiliate link, and Audible provides audiobooks, and it's an Amazon company, and it's good. It's very good. Audiobooks have a lot of advantages that I might talk about at another time, and I regularly consume them, complementing my reading. So if you don't have an Audible account, I recommend going to valiantgrowth.com/audible and signing up, and they now give 2 free ebooks as opposed to 1 that they used to before. And you have to sign up for a trial membership. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can cancel it, I think, in 30 days, and you still get to keep the books. Or you can go ahead, which I have a membership. It's they give you books. They give you 1 credit, then you can use every month to buy a book. If you sign up for that, there are different plans, but yeah, it's good. I recommend it. valiantgrowth.com/audible. And finally, you can also check out his workshop on YouTube. You can do that for free, and you can actually see the man. That one has a different advantage and a different disadvantage compared to the other 2. There are a lot more examples. They're actual people. They're recorded and actually using it, and he helps them, he corrects them. But I think it has a little bit less in terms of core philosophy. So honestly, I recommend consuming all 3 of them, but you get to choose which one you want to start with. So again, the book is valiantgrowth.com/NVC. Getting the free book on Audible, the free audio workshop on Audible, is at valiantgrowth.com/audible if you're signing up for a new membership, and I get a small commission for that, and I'd very much appreciate it if you went through that link and not just Googled Audible. And finally, the link to the YouTube stuff I will put in the description. Thank you for listening, and I dare you to flourish today. The best way to listen to the show is to go to your App Store or Play Store or wherever you are, and just searching for Valiant Growth, and there's a very nice app that you can use to listen to it.